In this video, I'll explain why Google Smart campaigns often fail for high-value products. As an agency, we've worked with many online retailers who have come across this issue relating to a lack of sales for key products. In some cases, they're retailers that want to sell just high-value products, or when I say high value, in some cases, we're talking about average order values in the region of 4 figures. Or in some cases, there are retailers that are selling a range of different products, and the higher ticket products are perhaps a smaller part of the catalog which they want to sell, but as a result of smart campaigns, they are making online sales, but it's just failing to ship the higher value inventory. For example, we took on one retailer who was using Google Ads to promote the business. They were generating sales, but the problem was that the smart campaigns were essentially ignoring the higher ticket products, which was the whole objective of introducing Google Ads to the business in the first place. So by taking them on and addressing the problems that we regularly find and implementing the strategies that we needed to resolve these things, we managed to see a 23% increase in revenue directly from higher value sales in as little as 90 days. Over the next few minutes, we're going to cover the 5 most common reasons that these smart campaigns fail and give you a process on how to diagnose them and the fixes you can implement into your own accounts this week. These is going to be very much focused on Google Ads, but there's no reason that this approach could potentially, some of the things we'll discuss could be applied in other platforms too. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about is measurement, and I'm sure you're going to have heard a number of you're going to find a number of videos, championing that measurement in ad platforms is essential, and it goes without saying. Now, I'm going to assume that you have conversion tracking installed. Google Smart campaigns aren't going to work without it. If you haven't got it installed, obviously get it installed. If you have got it installed, there's a couple of things that you need to check to make sure that it's implemented properly. So in your Google Ads account, first of all, navigate to goals, go to summary, and first of all, you just want to check that you are measuring the right action. Now, for online retailers, it's going to be a purchase, and that's going to be the only primary action that's going to be marked in the account. Everything else should be secondary. So that's an easy fix if that isn't already in place. But the thing that I really wanted to highlight was having a more robust tracking in place. And the reason for that is that with higher ticket sales, the volume is going to be far, far lower than you would get from any other type of product at a lower price point. So you need as much data as you can get. And especially today with the rise of cookie controls, browsers blocking user cookies, you've also got the rise of the cookie banners that you see all over the website, over websites, which is now, of course, should be on your website as part of GDPR. So when users opt out of this, it's going to prevent your tracking in analytics, in Google and other ad platforms too. So you need to draw on as many of the latest technological features of this conversion tracking. One of which that Google has is called enhanced conversions. What this does is basically helps mitigate the loss of data that you're going to have from when cookies are not being utilized in tracking user behavior online. So this is something that's going to be essential to get in place. Now, in this case, when you navigate to the diagnostic tab, if you have it installed, you're going to see this box here. It's going to say enhanced conversions is active. And you can click on that to see details. Now, in this case, we only have one conversion action, which is the primary action, which is purchase. So we haven't got any problems. In some cases, you might see that it might flag that you've got an issue with like one action. So for example, if you're using enhanced tracking for add to cart, it might have been implemented that way. That's not really that important because it's the purchase that you want to focus on. So you just want to make sure that the conversion action for your purchase is excellent. And it'll give you an idea of the coverage here. So if this is below 100%, then it's not matching up fully. It's going to have a different impact for different websites. It's going to depend how well it can match user data with what Google have got in their database. But nevertheless, it has, from what we've seen, it has made a significant impact on a number of client accounts. Aside from enhanced conversions, consent mode is another thing that you should also have in place. Now, what this is something that interacts with cookie banner that comes up on your website, and it basically means that communicates with Google to inform Google that a user has either granted or declined their consent for use of cookies with regard to the Google tag itself. So Google then knows that you're compliant with GDPR, and it's going to give you access to model conversion data. And again, we've seen significant improvements in campaign performance when this is implemented. It is, of course, having a cookie banner opt in and opt out on your website is going to be essential for GDPR if you're operating within the European Union and the UK. So it goes without saying that you're going to have it. So it makes sense to integrate it in a way that it communicates with the Google tag as well. So again, if you've got this implemented, you're going to see this box here. You can click it to see the details, and it's going to tell you if it's installed correctly or not. If you don't have a content management platform installed, then this box isn't going to be. This box simply just isn't going to be here. So it'd be wise to get it integrated with your Google Ads tag. The easiest way of doing that is by using an improved content management platform. So they're relatively easy to find. Just go to Google and search for Google CAP, and you're going to find a list of what is available. These are the partners they work with. I'm not going to advocate any particular ones here, but you can see that there's quite a few here. You're going to probably recognize some of them on either, you might even be using it on your website already. So that's the easiest way of getting consent mode implemented. With measurement covered and conversion tracking, I want to talk about conversion paths. And when I talk about conversion paths, I'm talking about the time it takes for people to convert on the website. And one of the things we see is that when new campaigns or new segments of the catalog are promoted with a test campaign, they're simply not run for long enough to allow for the campaign to succeed. Now, to some point, there's kind of two things to consider here. One of which is the learning phase. When you're using Google Smart campaigns, there's a learning phase of 15 to 20 days. So that sort of that portion of the time you can't really assess. But aside from that, there's going to be a long conversion path with the way that consumers take the decision on making that final purchase, especially when you're talking about high value products. So take for example, a high end gravel bike that's in the region of £3,500. To start with, the journey is going to be carbon gravel bike or best gravel bike 2024. That's that initial research phase, and then that initial search phase, and then you're going to sort of hone in on like price points, what specifications am I going to get. You're going to have discussions on social media, look at forums, look at reviews, and then you're going to hone in on sort of what price range you're looking for, and then the specification comparison, and you're going to get a flavor for what you want. Then, of course, you're going to start to focus on different brands and different models. At that point there, your purchase intent. So as you progress through time, the purchase intent gets higher and higher and higher. But the time it takes from this initial point here to over here, depending, of course, on where your touch point is at that point, what's the first time that they come across your website. There's going to be a lag between that first ad interaction and when they actually convert on the website. And I think something that I just want to highlight is that, particularly with very high value products, that can be significantly longer than you'd expect it to be. Take for example this account here. If we go to path metrics, and then we'll go across network, because I know that this is an automated campaign that was tested back in January. There we go. So, for example, this was just for a test campaign back at the beginning of the year. Only generated a couple of sales. It was a small catalog, but in the first, we've got 5 sales at 17,625 in value that happened within a day. So that would indicate that the campaign was like getting consumers at the point that they had the highest purchase intent. Whereas later on, you've got day 5, day 6, you've got another sale here at 2,175. Day 6, another sale here at 3,745. So if that campaign was assessed in the first week, you'd say, oh, it's done 17, just over 17.5K. But the following week, relative to the time that the ads were running, an additional an additional £6,000 came in. So that makes the success of the campaign look very, very different. And I appreciate here that there's a very small amount of data here that we're looking at, but this is just something to illustrate just to illustrate the point that you're going to need your campaigns to run for long enough not just in terms of getting enough traffic and spending enough money and getting enough sales to get enough data for smart campaigns to work, but also it's the time at which the people make those decisions come in. Because if you get an ad click, say 2 weeks ago, and the sale happened today, Google will allocate it to that click from 2 weeks ago, but you won't see it until today. So that's just something to be aware of, is that you've got to think about the conversion path that people are going to take. How long is it going to take them to convert from that initial touch point? And sort of the earlier in that purchase phase that your ads are going to be reaching, then the longer that's going to be. So the solution to this, of course, is that you've got to give your campaigns enough time to run. How do you know how long that's going to be? If you've got some business intelligence that you can apply from your own business, then great. That's going to help you a great deal. If you've got some history in your ads account, this report under goals and attribution, path metrics, that's going to help you too. But there isn't really one rule or one sort of size fits all formula that I can give you for this. But bear in mind that when you're running automated campaigns, if you're starting at the beginning, there's going to be a 10 to 15 day learning phase when you start that campaign off. So that sort of 2 week period, that's half a month kind of out the window, that you can't really assess that traffic. It's learning. So it's only after then. And then of course you've got to iron out seasonality. If you started a campaign in the middle of the summer holidays or the middle of the Easter break, for example, that might be a stronger than usual trading period. It might be a weaker than usual trading period. So you've got to give it enough time to kind of also iron out those potential peaks and troughs that are sort of a little bit outside the norm. So as a rule of thumb, I would say go for it. You want to be running campaigns consistently for 2 to 3 months. It's going to give you time to let algorithms learn, get out of the learning phase, avoid any odd seasonality, like week to week seasonality. And that's going to give you a more solid data set to assess. So this brings us nicely onto budget allocation. And budget allocation is something that is going to influence volume or the amount of traffic that you get. And if you're not advertising yet, if you're not advertising your higher ticket products yet, then how do you know what kind of budget to allocate it? This is a common mistake I see, is where campaigns aren't essentially allocated enough budget to give the smart campaigns enough wiggle room to optimize for the traffic that you need to reach to get these higher ticket sales. So with this in mind, you've got to give your campaigns enough budget to optimize and reach this traffic. And I think an important point here is that, especially in search advertising, which Google smart campaigns are going to be heavily hinged on, is that you're in an auction, basically. You get against your competitors in terms of what you're willing to pay for traffic, or should I say, what you're willing to pay for sales of a certain product versus what your competitors will pay. So in cases where you're selling products of a higher value, particularly in cases where you're selling products for 4 figures, the reward potential of that sale is much higher. And therefore your competitors are going to be aware of that. And their strategy is going to be centered around that too. So in those cases, it's not unusual to see a higher cost of traffic or higher cost per click and a higher cost per sale as a result to achieve those sales. So one of the things, as I say, a common problem that we've seen is that campaigns aren't allocated with enough budget to be able to, move enough or optimize enough. So how do you figure out what that might be? Well, as a rule of thumb, you've got to think about, like, what's your average order value? Let's just say, hypothetically, it's £3,800 average order value, and the margin on that, let's say, is going to be 30%. So the potential reward for that is going to be, I've got to do quick maths here, times 30%. So your gross margin on that product is going to be £1,140. So it's quite a substantial amount of margin. We're not taking into account sort of fulfillment, business costs, and advertising costs. This is just the product, just the gross profit or gross margin. But of course, if you're selling against competitors that are selling products of this around this value, this is just basic maths. They're going to be able to compete in this range. So you've got to kind of figure out what's the maximum cost that you want to accept, or what's the maximum cost per sale you want to accept in the testing phase. This might be a little bit higher than you'd normally want, going forward long term for sustainability. But in terms, if it's brand new, like, what are you willing to invest? You're going to test it. You're going to get data. You're going to try and get the system to learn to who this product sells to, and then you can start to rein in a later date. But at this stage, what is it you're willing to pay for a sale? Obviously, £1,140 is a lot to pay for a single sale. Realistically, what could it be? Let's say 20% of gross margin, say, so 10%, 20%, sorry. So that's £228. So 1140 times 20%, 228. This is just hypothetical. But say this is where the market is. Everybody else that you're competing with is going to have this in as part of their strategy. It might be 10%, it might be 30%. We don't know, but it's just an exercise to kind of get an idea to what you're going to be competing with. And therefore, if you're running automated campaigns, you really need. Google suggests that you need 15 sales over a 30-day period to see success. In our experience, it's 20 to 30. But let's just say you want to get 20 sales a month, 20 sales. Where are we? So 20 sales over 30 days, 20 sales at an average cost of 228. You can see where this is going, can't you? 228 is 4, 5, 60. All things being equal, if the traffic was out there and you're able to maximize your spend, you'd have to spend on average of £4,500 over every 30 days to sustain the level of sales at that cost per sale to get smart bidding to learn, or smart campaigns to learn. So you can see where we're going with this. And I think just something to add here is that this isn't just you can't just do this exercise and go, right, okay, that's my budget. It isn't going to work like that. But it is something to consider against other research methods. When you're selling products for this kind of level, this kind of price point, realistically, is there going to be enough people out there to buy? Are you going to sell, it's a gravel bike for £3,800? Are you going to sell 20 gravel bikes for £3,800 a month based on the inventory that you have? Depends how many brands you stock, depends how many models are in that brand, depends on the brand power, how many people are looking for that brand. Let's take, so you've got to layer it something. So what else can you use? Google Keyword Planner is a good place to kind of get an idea as to what the search volume is for the sort of keywords that the products that you sell are going to have. Now, what I've done here is I've just put specialized gravel bike page into Google's Keyword Planner as a means of just to start off with a website, specialized.com, gravel bikes. Actually, I'll get rid of all that because I think that's what's throwing it out. Use this page only, just to get an idea for the keywords that what kind of volume you might expect. So, obviously gravel bikes, it's got 27,000 searches a month. You are going to see some exposure to this in this case if you're trying to advertise these bikes, but your bid's going to be quite low, the cost of traffic's going to be quite low, the click-through rate's not going to be that high. But specialized gravel bike, for example, that's going to have a slightly higher level of intent. But as you see, it says here 1,300 monthly searches. That might sound quite a lot, but that's not realistically all the clicks that your ads are going to get for that keyword, because your click-through rate is going to be anything from 1 to 5% or whatever it might be. So you're only going to get a small portion of this. Let's just say hypothetically your click-through rate was 3%. Even in that case, you're only going to get 39 clicks for this search term. And realistically, how many sales are you going to get off that? So going back to our previous example, our previous exercise, you're not going to spend £6,000 on a keyword that you can only get 1,300 impressions for. So, and this brings me nicely onto audiences and audience targeting. So, when you're running your smart campaigns, they're going to be going for different audiences. A lot of it is going to be search driven. The intent of that can be identified by how they search. And this is actually quite a good example. So take, for example, specialized gravel bike. There's quite a high number of searches for that. This column here is going to give you a cost, top of page, low range, 4p, high range, 40p. But if you hone in on sort of a particular model, let's say specialized Diverge E5, the low range a bit higher at 25p and the top range of 81p. And the reason for that is something that I mentioned earlier on in the video, is that as the sort of purchase intent goes up, market kind of sets the point of where campaigns automation is bidding on these terms, because it carries a higher purchase intent than specialized gravel bike. So you can see how the audience targeting is going to be, you're going to pay more for a warmer audience than for a colder audience. So I hope this all ties everything together that I've already just discussed about budgeting and all that kind of thing, and you need it to give it wiggle room. So with those other points we've already covered, this is also always going to help you. It's going to help with your audience target. It's going to help your campaigns target a warmer audience. And I think one of the things that you've got to do is also, when this is running, you've given it the budget, you've given it the time. You've also got to keep your eye on it to make sure there's going to be some oversight to make sure that your campaigns are actually targeting the sort of search queries you would expect to see for your product. And the place to find that is going to be in the Insights tab in your Performance Max campaign, for example, or your Google Ad account. When you're running automated campaigns, you've got to provide some oversight to make sure that they're going to be going for the audiences that you feel are going to be a warm audience. Essentially, you want it to be related to the product that you're selling and indicate some kind of purchase intent. So, for example, with Google Performance Max campaigns, they're going to be heavily hinged on shopping. So you're going to be able to see an idea of what the search queries are that trigger your ads. So you can get a good insight into there as to see that if it is actually serving ads, all the sort of relevant keywords that be related to the products that you're trying to promote. So to get access to that, go into your campaign, go to Insights Reports and click Insights. Scroll down the page to search term insights. And in here, these have been blurred out for privacy reasons. You're going to be able to see what kind of search queries are coming up for that ad and order by clicks. You can even see by conversions to some degree. Now, there's a couple of things you can glean from this. Is that if you can see that they are in fact related to the product that you're selling, that's all great. You can also see if those search queries are leading to conversions. If you find that there's a lot of clicks for search terms that are not related to the product, then there's going to be a data problem with your product feed. And that's going to be something that you need to optimize, and that's something we're probably going to cover in another video. But this is how you get to diagnose it, and this is how you get to see that it's going for the right audience. While you're in here, what's also important is some smart campaigns will sometimes do unknowingly is embed themselves in an already established purchase journey that you might have generated from another traffic source, perhaps organic or Meta or Bing or whatever. So if you see search terms coming up in here for your business name, and that's all generating the conversions, then you know that it's not actually driving customer acquisition. It's just basically embedding itself and getting people at the very, very, very last point of the purchase journey, which is not the purpose of the campaign. So that's another way of diagnosing that in here. So again, the solution to that is going to be, you're going to have to block that keyword from this campaign for your business name to make sure that it is a cold audience targeting campaign only. So with budget and time and audience targeting covered and essentially search volume, that does actually bring us back nicely onto the challenges of volume. This might be something that you face when it comes to managing your campaigns for higher ticket sales. Many of the above points that we've discussed are going to be addressing a volume of traffic and volume data to some point. But for some products that are of a higher price point, search volume is going to be very, very low. And that can actually present a challenge. As we've already said, automated campaigns need around 20 to 30 conversions a month to optimize fully. But if you're selling a product that doesn't really have that many searches on an average basis, then it's going to be very, very difficult for the campaigns to optimize fully. I've taken here Dagger Kayaks, for example. As a brand overall, there's 880 searches a month. But when you get into the names of the various boats, the search volume dwindles quite significantly. This is 110 average monthly searches, with a low click-through rate. How many clicks are you going to get from that? It's going to be a few a month. How many sales are you going to get from that? A few a month. So depending on what you've got grouped in your campaign, if you only sell this brand, for example, your automated campaigns are never going to optimize properly for this type of for this product. If you've got other brands and other boats that are kind of at around of equal specification and another price point in that same campaign, it's going to pad it out and aggregate, with all those products aggregated, you're going to have aggregated traffic and it might be able to optimize. But from an individual product level, it's going to be, it might find it quite difficult. And that's obviously going to present a big challenge for sellers that are, might have a number of brands and products that don't attract that kind of search volume. So what do you do in scenarios? Well, it depends on where you're at really and what you've tried. As I say, if you have a number of brands in your store or a number of products in your store that are going to be collectively have a decent kind of search volume, one method would be to isolate those products into a standalone smart campaign and give them a push that way, give them their own budget. It's ring fenced. You can also see the data. It's going to be more clearly because the data is going to be relevant to those products. Another way of tackling it, of course, and this is one of the things that we do as an agency, is that we see this problem quite regularly for clients that have, are looking at a higher price point, and maybe it might be a technical product, so the conversion path is long. So volume is always going to be a challenge for automated campaigns to learn from and optimize, in which case we have to fall back and use a more hands-on approach using standard shopping campaigns. This is because by running standard shopping campaigns, we get greater control over targeting. We can see the search queries much more clearly. We can control bidding much more. It becomes almost like in early days, it's a traffic campaign. And we can get control over that traffic by using the insights that we've got as human beings and from a business to make sure that we're targeting the right search queries to get to the right audience and essentially get the sales we need over the long term. One of the methods we use for this is called the Intent Cascade Method, where we layer our campaigns in a way where we can gather up general interest for those sort of broader keywords, and then hone in on brand, and then more kind of specification-led search queries that have that higher purchase intent. And this way, we're going to be able to better allocate bidding and allocate budgets. And for example, one example might be we'd have 70% of the budget allocated to what we know are high intent to purchase search queries, and then 20% a bit further up, and then 10% above there. And then it's just obviously it's optimized and balanced out, based on performance, based on cost per sale targets, and return on investment. And that's one of the ways that we do it. And just as an example, we took on a client that had obviously this is going to be a problem. Their price point was way into the 4-figure mark, and in the first 90 days, we managed to take their revenue from 58,000 to 167 in the first 90 days, and that was using this kind of method. And I think the point here is that if your smart campaigns fail, all is not lost. Even if you might have your budget allocation correct, you might have your search, your audience targeting correct. Your feed is well optimized. You've got your conversion tracking in, so your audience targeting is on point. It should be able to optimize. You've given it enough time, but volume all these things are to address a problem with volume. But if that is still a problem, all is not lost, because there is a potential to get sales moving using this alternative method. So at the end of the day, smart campaigns use AI. AI needs data. It needs quite a lot of data to identify patterns. So if the data just isn't there to be had, then it is never going to succeed. So I think at that point that should wrap everything up. Thanks for watching. I hope this has added value and helped you identify what issues you may be having, and hopefully given you some opportunities to take your campaigns forward in pursuit of these higher value sales. If you've liked this, please hit the like button. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments. I will do my best to answer every single one of them. And if you like what you see and you'd like to see more videos, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.